Okay, this is your World War III breaking news update, and please pardon my disheveled mental and physical presentation today. I'm completely and utterly exhausted. I'm on a calorie restriction because I'm trying to get that six-pack back before the proverbial shizzy hits the fitzel. And I'm also really bogged down with orders here at the warehouse right now. We have been running on all engines trying to get people's stuff out because another war is starting once again. We have a trade war. We have the ceasefire suspension between Hamas and Israel. They are now fully going at it once again, although it's arguably very one-sided in that you have the most technologically advanced society bombing people relentlessly who are currently living in tents. We also have a war with Iran brewing. We have some very up-to-date information. We also have to dispel some myths and shed some lights on some of the rumors, which is rumors intelligence, circulating right now. We also have an incursion of 59 Chinese warplanes into Taiwanese airspace. Okay, major developments across the board. The war between Russia and Ukraine is unrelenting as well. Everything is escalating across the board. Remember, it wasn't called World War I until after World War II was over. It was called the Great War. Okay, so when you're in a world war, you don't really realize it until it's over. All right, now we are most certainly in the beginning, in the nascent phase of World War III. And you need to seize on any opportunity to buy low and sell high. Do not be a panic prepper. You want to prepare in the off season, not when we're in an acute crisis. That is why I wish people wouldn't file all to the door at once, but this is why we do what we do. Anyways, let's talk about what's happening. There is a rumor circulating that 3 U.S. aircraft carriers are en route to the Middle East. This is unconfirmed. This is pure rumor at this point in time. And I would say that it's been pretty widely debunked probably by the time of making this video. However, I will say where there is smoke, there is fire. This is from a Yemeni news source. Now, the Yemeni news source, Yemen is basically in a state of civil war. So I think the news source, which has been verified by Google, is probably on the pro-Western side of Yemen, but don't quote me on that. Anyways, some information got leaked that the U.S. is sending 3 aircraft carriers, which would be needed in order to do sustained sorties, not just into Yemen, but potentially using Yemen as a vector to go to war with Iran. And we have some pretty significant information to share with you about the situation in Iran, which appears to be flaring up as well. Now, right now, again, there is no confirmation of any aircraft carriers, any more aircraft carriers, I should say, headed towards the Middle East. But what I will say is if China or Russia were to catch a rumor, or the Iranians were to catch a rumor that, in fact, maybe they were to intercept the communication that the United States was planning on doing this, they would have no problem, I think, especially at this point in time, using that as leverage in order to basically send a shot across the bow to the U.S., signifying we know what you're doing, and so we have no problem alerting the Iranians and the Yemenis to your intentions that you're going to be continuing with your sustained operations within the region. U.S. CENTCOM has now stated that they will be doing sustained operations within Yemen. This is all despite the fact that Yemen actually suspended its attacks on Israel and even its attacks in the Red Sea pretty much since Biden has been out of office. So they suspended that when the ceasefire deal was brokered. There were still a few attacks here and there, but it's interesting that the United States would take this proactive approach unless they knew that war was about to flare up again, unless they wanted to directly use this as a vector. Some statements made by Trump today signify that they are now holding Iran accountable for any sort of defensive maneuvers that the Houthis exact against U.S. warships. So because the Houthis are largely utilizing Iranian weapons, the U.S. is now going to hold Iran accountable if the Houthis defend themselves, essentially. So you know, no matter how you slice it, we're likely going to war with Iran sooner than most expected. Now, you have this big smokescreen right now. Remember when I told you that Trump and his team were going to release these conspiracy trinkets as this stuff was starting to ramp up? Well, right now you have a situation where gold, it appears as though it's now broken the 3,000 ceiling and it's transcended that new level. So now we're now in the 3,000 to 4,000 era of gold, which signifies widespread socioeconomic and geopolitical instability on a level that we probably haven't seen. And I believe 3,000 to 4,000 is where the war with Iran starts. Likely 4,000 to 5,000 is where the war with China starts. We also have Trump saying that he's going to release the JFK files tomorrow. Well, we all know what happened when they released the Epstein files, right? I'm quite certain that it's going to be another redacted nothing burger meant to act as a smokescreen. So you're going to have a confluence of things unfolding tomorrow. You're going to have what will likely just be a forestalling phone call between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, which will temporize the situation between Ukraine and Russia and forestall any actionable advance in terms of negotiations on that particular front. You're going to have the JFK release. You're going to have the war with Israel and Gaza that has now recommenced, and you're going to have the ramping up of the bombardment of Yemen, and potentially, as we're going to talk about, the escalation on the Persian Gulf with Iran. Now, here is what's going on in Iran, okay? So, 4 Iranian missile ships crossed the Strait of Hormuz under the protection of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They're trying to deploy these warships far away from their borders, but within the range of their missile defense, potentially just not wanting to be boxed in to the Persian Gulf, where the United States does have a lot of military assets. We could very well see the price of oil go through the roof unless Trump decides to drain the strategic oil reserve, which is something they very well could do. Will it be enough to quell the rise in price that will result from all-out warfare raging in the Middle East? We're talking, of course, about Iran and its proxies waging war against Saudi Aramco and other oil producers within the region. Will the release from the strategic oil reserve, which I believe is what they're going to try to do to alleviate pressure on global oil supply, will that be enough to keep the price of oil down? I guess we are going to find out, because oil right now, I mean, you could hear a pin drop. All you're hearing is crickets. We're not seeing any precipitous spikes just yet. Either way, the Iranians are on a full state of combat readiness, and IRGC missile units are placed on full alert. At least 9 Iranian ballistic missile platforms were seen moving towards the southern regions of the country, and an MCQ-4 Global Hawk drone was intercepted by F-14 Tomcat fighters. Those are the Iranian F-14s, just around the Bushehr nuclear power plant. So the U.S. is currently running ISR within that region, signaling that we are likely going to see some sort of attack, possibly, or the United States is just feigning aggression in an attempt to create some sort of readiness exhaustion on the part of the Iranians and just use it for subterfuge purposes. Now, right now, the pressure is on by the international community. When they say international community, it's a very Western-centric way of saying NATO and Israel. Okay, that's basically who the international community is. They're applying pressure to Iran to basically shut down its nuclear program. That's what it's come to, okay? So the war with Iran is coming, and I don't know if people realize how big of a deal that's going to be, but Iran is a country of nearly 90 million people, okay? They are connected with Belarus and Russia, so they now have a military partnership with Belarus, which is basically Russia's proxy. Belarus has Russia's nuclear weapons, so Iran having a military strategic partnership, which is even deeper than the one that they have with Russia, signifies that Russia is offering their tacit military support to Iran via their Belarusian proxy. This was a deal that was just settled recently. So all of these things are interconnected. So if Iran starts devolving and going to shit, well, guess who gets a lot of their oil from there? The Chinese. China currently is flexing its muscle right now in the Indo-Pacific by sending 59 warplanes across the air defense identification zone in Taiwan. Not completely unprecedented, but nonetheless, I believe that the timing and this flurry of news that is unfolding, I believe that it's all related, and I believe that we're getting closer to what I've long since termed Day X, that fateful day when the table just gets flipped, okay? Right now, we've been relying on the Iranians basically withholding their best cards, and in fact, watching their proxies tumble one by one, and watching Israel get some pretty substantial victories in the process because they've been able to systematically destroy the Iranian proxy network. Had on October 7th, Iran just let everything fly, we might be in an entirely different world this time. But we're relying on what essentially amounts to the cowardice of a lot of the belligerents involved. As I indicated, F-14 jets and drones reportedly intercepted by a U.S. spy drone near Iranian airspace. Now, the Iranians, if they wanted to, could easily bring down this drone, so I presume it was not in Iranian airspace. The Houthis have brought down nearly a dozen of these drones themselves, leveraging some of the lower tier Iranian tech. So I would not be surprised if Iran could easily take these things out. They're not hard to shoot down. Trump has also indicated that CENTCOM is putting all of its U.S. Middle Eastern bases, please shut up, phone! It's putting all of its Middle Eastern bases on full-scale war alert because, of course, if they do attack Iran, then part of the potential outcome is going to be a massive attack on all of the U.S. bases within the region, although I'm not sure that the Iranians would escalate that quickly. What they would possibly do is target some other proxies in the region, and most certainly follow through with True Promise 3, which in their minds, they still owe Israel another massive bombardment of ICBMs. Okay, I gotta turn my phone down because this is getting ridiculous. They should just know I'm shooting a video right now. Who's texting me here? Oh, geez, there's been a train derailment in my region. That's not good. You know what? Little prepper tip for you guys here. Always, people always look at me weird because when there's a train track, railroad crossing, I always park at least 3 or 4 cars back. I don't care if people give me weird looks. One of these days, it's going to happen. Anyways, that's just a prepper tip for you. Never be those people that park like right close up and you're boxed in behind you with 50 cars behind you and you can't get out if you have to. That train could come off the rails and it's game over. Anyways, back to the news. Now, it appears as though Netanyahu is once again back in a secure bunker in Tel Aviv and operating out of there. Iran is reportedly in a state of panic. Take this with a grain of salt because there's all kinds of, disinformation. The fog of war is thick. We've seen this ever since October 7th. So you got to take these things with a grain of salt. But nonetheless, it seems as though the potential flashpoint between Iran and the United States is going to come when Iran and its intelligence vessels that are currently in and around the, what do they call it, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, potentially engage with the United States warships that are also there. Now, there were rumors that a U.S. warship fired on and actually sunk an Iranian ISR intelligence gathering ship, but that has been unconfirmed. Lots of rumors circulating right now. And what commonly happens at times like these is that in an attempt to create hysteria and widespread panic, especially amongst the Iranian population, you'll get a lot of Israeli accounts circulating false information to get everybody into a scurry in an attempt to try to, interfere with the mobilization of, in this case, the Iranian military. So, U.S. intelligence sources claim that Iranian warships in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden are providing real-time intelligence to Yemeni forces. And once again, Trump has accused the Iranians of, rightly so, providing the Yemenis with weapon systems in order to, depending on who you're talking to, either offend or defend. If you're in the camp that believes that Israel is committing a genocide, then you believe that the Yemenis are the righteous ones here, and they're actively the only people who are taking one for the team and trying to defend the Gaza population, and doing so by imposing this embargo through the Red Sea. Or you're of the camp that what they're doing is illegal by international standards and that they need to be stopped. That is the opinion of Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, which is why they're ramping up operations within that region. And as one of Iran's last formidable proxies, one which will certainly never be quelled. I mean, if you can't quell the Gazans, you're never going to get through to the Yemenis. But what you can probably do is put down enough suppressing force that they're no longer able to as easily attack ships and cargo ships, and you can get that transport and those waterways moving once again in the Red Sea. But it's very likely that this is going to spill over into Iran, and when that happens, Iran has threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is going to foreseeably bring up the price of oil 100, 200%. But again, Trump could easily just open the spigot of the strategic oil reserve, which has been slowly being replenished as oil prices are currently down. And I think, MAGA would be all for it, because Trump will make the promise of, don't worry, we're going to refill it up with all of our oil, and we're probably going to annex Canada or something, fill in the blank. Now, Iran's central bank has also been storing large amounts of gold amid rising tensions. So as we go into the multipolar world, all of these belligerents in these conflicts are going to start hoarding gold more and more, whether it's the United States, Europe, Iran, Turkey. Everybody is hoarding gold. China, that's why the price of gold is currently skyrocketing. I'm not going to bore you with the actual numbers, but it's a substantial amount. It's a record amount of gold currently being hoarded in Iran as well. Iraq has also warned of possible upcoming Israeli airstrikes on Iraqi territory. Syria is in a full-blown state of civil war. Once again, they appear to have a temporary ceasefire with Lebanon on the border there, but the Middle East is just a powder keg, which unfortunately, it's like a pile of gunpowder, and that gunpowder has a fuse going to it to everywhere else in the world. So if the Middle East goes up in flames, you are going to see that inflame the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. It's going to just, everybody right now, people have no idea. People just think, okay, the war is going to be over. And that's just la la land. This is just the nascent phase of this whole thing, guys. World War III is just in the beginning. And you need to really start taking seriously your long-term strategy. It's all fine to start off with a bug-out bag, but let's just hope that let's say we have 5 years before this thing really starts knocking on our doorstep here. I don't think we have that long. And we certainly are going to be touched by all sort of immiserating circumstances up until that point when it goes kinetic. But let's just say you do. You need to start preparing long-term for this. This is what the smart money is doing right now, okay? It's an implacable situation which is not going to improve. And all that you're seeing right now is just Trump and Putin temporizing because it suits them domestically. These are both megalomaniacal individuals who basically are at a point of no return, especially with Vladimir Putin. I was talking with an expert today who was telling me that historically speaking, once a country goes into full-blown war mobilization, it's almost impossible for them to turn that ship around. economically. Even if all the sanctions were lifted today, Russia's level of war mobilization, which is basically where they're dumping most of their money, will make it almost impossible for them to turn that ship around. Certainly not for decades and decades, and not without some sort of economic catastrophe that would likely result in a leadership in Russia which was far more unpredictable and unstable than even Vladimir Putin himself. Okay? So I think I've touched on most of the stuff that's ongoing in the Middle East right now. Yemen is getting lit up big time as we speak. I talked about CENTCOM going into sustained operations, talked about what's happening in Iraq, and I'm just, honestly, guys, I'm so wired, but I'm also incredibly exhausted because we're trying to get as much info out there as possible. And right now I can tell you the shadow banning on YouTube is immense. They are rerouting traffic, and I know this firsthand because I have intel with respect to this, and I can see it with my own eyes. Right after Trump got elected, they started channeling traffic into leftist-leaning accounts. NAFO accounts, pro-Ukrainian accounts are just getting immense amounts of traffic. It probably went up 200-300%. And I don't know if this is an attempt to try to balance the Hegelian dialectic, because they seem people starting to lean too much to the right, and they always like to keep it the proverbial they, always like to keep it in a dead heat, you know, right to the finish. Because if you don't have that polarization, then, you know, people could potentially come together and revolt, right? And in either direction, that's not a good thing if you're the multi-billionaire elites who own everything of value, real value. And so I think that's what's going on, but there's no doubt shadow banning. I've been shadow banned probably for years. I don't call attention to it often because I just find that, I don't know, I don't want to give them that much credit. You know, I don't want to, and I don't want to play into it. I don't want to, I'm not looking for any sort of sympathy or anything. I'll navigate around it. And in fact, I see it as somewhat of a mixed blessing that I have not been able to break a certain ceiling, glass ceiling, because if I had, then there might be more initiative to cancel me, so to speak. So as long as I can stay in this sort of Goldilocks zone of being influential but not too influential, you're kind of all right. But once you get onto that Russell Brand level or Andrew Tate level, that's when they try to throw some cases at you and they try to silence you. So, you know, so long as I remain at this level, I guess it's a mixed blessing, but that's no doubt happening. I'm aware of it. People message me every day about how hard it is to find the videos, and I appreciate your concern. And, you know, we're just going to keep on going. When the panic sets in and, you know, everybody is running out to buy toilet paper again, that's when people are going to come back to the channel. But as I always say, you don't want to be that panic prepper. Okay, my whole objective with this channel is to try to get the majority of people out there thinking proactively about these things, thinking laterally about these things, in the sense that they're just not linearly responding to every current event, news, disaster, acute crisis that unfolds. You want to be proactive. You want to buy low, sell high. You want to prepare in the off season, okay? Now, I'm preaching to the choir because, of course, these videos are not being put in front of other people, but it's just a force of habit. Now, it appears as though troops deployments to Ukraine is now in the operational phase, according to Keir Starmer. I mean, I first reported on this back in late 2023, so the talk of deploying peacekeeping, reaction-based forces, whatever you want to call them, to Ukraine is like old news to all of us, right? But nonetheless, they're finally reaching a phase of actual operational planning for this, and they're saying that it's going to result in 30,000 troops from the UK, Canada, because of course they have their new patsy in there, Mark Carney, who will play ball as much as Trudeau would, no questions asked. Australia, Turkey, which is surprising, and France may be deployed. Now, Russia may actually be okay with Turkey participating in some capacity of all of those potential countries, because of course they're a potential intermediary between NATO and the Russians. But nonetheless, Dmitry Medvedev has basically threatened NATO with nuclear war once again if troops are deployed in this region. It's hard to say whether or not the West will actually take those threats seriously, considering pretty much every red line has been overstepped up until this point with very little consequence. Starmer hasn't clarified if British forces would have authorization to shoot and kill Russian soldiers, but the rules of engagement are still pending. Troops deployed only after Putin agrees to a ceasefire and halts all air and sea operations. Many people are calling for some sort of imposition of a no-fly zone, which once again would be likely something that would bring Europe to the brink of war with Russia. Now, again, I must remind people of Article 6 of NATO, a lesser commonly known article. Everybody's familiar with Article 5, which is basically if a NATO country is attacked, all the other 32, soon to be 33, as Ukraine as a de facto NATO state, all other 32 countries will come to their defense, although that is not necessarily codified in a way which makes it categorical. It means that they could come to their defense, so it's still kind of blurry. But regardless, Article 6 means that outside of NATO territory, all of those countries don't have to come to your aid if you get attacked. So if Europe or the UK and France wants to be dumb enough to go and put their troops in harm's way in Ukraine, well, that doesn't necessarily warrant a triggering of Article 5 because of Article 6, which stipulates that outside of NATO's borders doesn't necessarily count unless Vlad decides to detonate a nuke in Ukraine and that radioactive fallout blows back into some NATO country, and that's when they decide to trigger Article 5. But understand, that's when day X gets really dangerously close, okay? Macron has also suggested that he will deploy troops and that Vladimir Putin's permission will not be required. So some very aggressive rhetoric by the Europeans. The Ukrainians will never relent, okay? And there's all kinds of mismessaging coming out of Kursk right now that they're not surrounded and this, that, and whatever. All I'll say is that many people are chalking up the Kursk salient's failure to a suspension of intelligence and weapons by the Trump administration. But what most people don't realize is that the logistical supply lines into that region were under heavy fire weeks in advance of that, and that the situation was collapsing long before the imposition of those restrictions on intel sharing. So it's difficult to say exactly what's going to happen with this phone call tomorrow. I'm guessing that not a whole lot is going to happen, and we're just going to see the usual deferral, and we'll be right back to square one, essentially. And I think that's what Trump wants. Trump wants the conflict to remain in a state of stasis and just not escalate, while Europe remilitarizes and takes on the reins of that particular conflict, takes on the responsibility, because the United States is about to awaken the sleeping giant, and that is China. Okay, if you think that fighting the Russians was intense, or increase that by an order of magnitude, and that's what you're going to get with the Chinese. These guys have been preparing in every possible way for the war that's coming for the last 20 years, and we don't even know what they have. Okay, so if anything is going to wake people up, it's going to be when China really starts to take action. And I think that could potentially come by way of what happens with Iran, just like what happened in World War II when I believe it was an embargo that the United States put on Japan in order to prevent Japan from getting oil. That's how World War II, that's why the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And you could see something very similar play out with China, in that the Chinese, cut off from Iranian oil, have no other choice, especially if the Russian Federation collapses, which is not going to happen without a nuclear incident. But if it does, become balkanized, or, you know, their oil refineries just get completely annihilated and are no longer functional, then China is going to be without oil. Now, China is making all sorts of preparations to hedge against this. They are stockpiling all kinds of commodities. They are stockpiling copper, grains. Their strategic oil reserve is filling up at the same time as the United States. So they're preparing. They're going to alternative energy. They're going to EVs. They're, you know, using coal-fired plants, thermal plants. They have the biggest photovoltaic production in the world, and that is growing exponentially. So they're preparing to be completely disconnected, but it's likely not going to be enough. If they take out Iran, China is going to have no other alternative but to respond in some way and to make a statement. So we're in inauspicious times, to say the least. Now, Ukraine is about to increase their mobilization. This is in response to a ceasefire proposal. Remember when I told you Mike Waltz, who him and J.D. Vance were chastising Zelensky in the Oval Office for sending men to their deaths against their will? Yet in the back channels, they're trying to force Zelensky to lower the conscription age to 18. Well, that's exactly what Ukraine is going to do now. So in response to the ceasefire proposal, they have now increased mobilization. This is according to Alexander Dubinsky, a deputy of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, who is in custody on suspicion of treason. So it appears as though the rument on the situation is that they're most certainly going to do that was part of the deal. Germany is also preparing for war. Now, this is a story which actually was first talked about probably about 6 months ago or so, but it's now starting up once again. The Bavarian health minister, Judith Gerlach, says that Germany's healthcare system must prepare for potential war scenarios. I've been talking for the past 18 months or so about these European advancements in trying to prepare their population for war. Well, it seems as though it's becoming very real because Germany is in full-blown war mobilization mode. If you haven't realized it yet, that is why their stock markets, especially around their military stocks, are pumping. Gerlach has emphasized healthcare as equally important to national defense as the Bundeswehr armed forces. She cites threats from Russia and possibly security partnership shifts under U.S. President Trump. Calls for civilian operations plan, clear guidelines, and increase hospital capacity beyond peacetime norms, and is urging adjustments to regulations and audits during crises, plus protection of the healthcare IT infrastructure from cyber attacks. They advocate increasing domestic pharmaceutical production to secure medical supplies. So in the United States, they have a strategic medicine reserve, which largely, in some way, 90% of it is related to China. Now, 90% of the meds don't come from China. In fact, most of them come from India, but China is implicated in that process somewhere throughout the supply chain. So this is why we had our guest, Dr. Sean Rowland, on the channel just a few days ago, where he was talking about potential price hikes, not potential, actual price hikes coming as a result of the Chinese trade war that's about to come up. And this is, no pun intended, the trump card that the Chinese have to basically use as leverage in negotiations, that they basically control. They don't only control the supply, but they also control the trade route that a lot of these American supplies take in order to get these medical supplies that, of course, what is it? I don't know, half the population has medication in the United States. And that's immense leverage that they're going to have in negotiations. And now all of these European countries are preparing to have their own sort of strategic reserve that is similar. Germany, according to French media, is getting ready to supply long-range Taurus missiles to Ukraine. We talked about that at length. I'm not going to read Trump's tweet with respect to Yemen and Iran, but it's quite provocative, and basically it's a threat to Iran that if Yemen fights back, we're going to hold you accountable, okay? And Germany is also recruiting Afghan immigrants to fight as mercenaries for Ukraine, something that I've been saying was going to happen for the longest time. The Iranians have made an appeal to the United Nations, one last-ditch appeal, which is likely not going to, even if it is honored and even if it is heard, is likely going to be inconsequential. And there's another study that showed recently that human intelligence peaked during the 2010s. So it's no surprise that Conor McGregor is standing in the Oval Office on the presidential podium talking to the press today. That is where we're at, okay? So you need to keep prepping, man. You know, don't listen to the normies. Just keep on prepping. Live your life. Enjoy your life. Remember, the best things in life are free, but it's good to get your material bases covered, because when it all goes down, everybody is going to file for the exits at the same time, and there's not going to be all the supplies that you need. So you got to prepare in advance. Okay, that's the whole point of preparation. It's about providence. It's about being proactive, and it's about not panicking. It's about freeing up freeing up the system so that it can serve other people in need when crisis arises. As a prepper, you take the stress off that system in not clogging up the hospitals or not clogging up the grocery stores or the roadways when the crap is hitting the fan. So I hope you guys found something of value out of this video. I would encourage you to go check out some of the videos we released over the weekend. We interviewed Dr. Sean Rowland of Jace Medical, who is talking about supply chain issues as a result of the trade war with China. We talked with Capital Cosm about his thoughts about the transport of gold in record amounts from London to the United States, as well as many other things. And I also did a EDC video, everyday carry, okay? And I break down what I think is one of the best EDCs. And I know I'm a little bit biased, but you know, when you do this 24/7 for a living and you only think about this very thing, go and check out that video. Get yourself the gear. We have an EDC builder on the website, Canadian Preparedness, and the more you add to your order, the better the discount you get. Every man, you're not a man or a woman unless you carry a couple knives, a good multi-tool, and a decent flashlight, and well, that's all we can really carry in Canada. There's a lot of other knickknacks in that video that go beyond it, but it revolves around the pants, okay? So I've basically perfected a system that's designed to work with a certain set of pants, and that's where a lot of everyday carry gurus seem to go wrong, is they just do a pocket dump. They just say, okay, this is what you carry in your pockets, but they don't say these are the kind of pockets that should be carrying this stuff. And so that's what I provide to you in that video. Stay tuned, because we got a lot of information coming your way, just a ton of guests and concept videos, how-to videos, survival stuff. People say, Nate, why don't you make those prepping videos anymore? We do. I release 2 or 3 of them a week, but YouTube doesn't put them in front of people for some reason. It's like they don't want to cross the streams. They don't want people to be informed and prepare. It's almost like they want people to be uninformed and prepare, because if they were informed and they prepare, then maybe, just maybe, they would be a threat to said system. But I mean, we're not a threat, right? We're just informed. An informed public is what you need at times like these. These are the people who are going to allow us to persevere through the very tumultuous times that are about to unfold. And this is only the beginning, because based on some of the experts I've spoken to, who I'm going to be releasing videos soon, this thing is only in its infancy, and it's going to ramp up in the run up to 2030. So buckle up, get ready, keep on stacking, keep on prepping, keep on oiling that steel and freeze drying that food, or canning that food, or tending to them animals, whatever you got to do to get ready, because it will not be in vain, unfortunately. And it's just it's a fairly fulfilling lifestyle, I should say, being a prepper. People think, oh, you're always angry and you're always on edge. Nope, farthest thing from the truth. We have a lot of fun on the channel. It's possible that you, in fact, are angry and you just don't click on those videos because you only want doom and gloom. So go and give those other videos a chance. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe.